Hello, this is Dipayan. We are live on YouTube.
Okay, fine, fantastic.
Welcome, Dipayan.
Hi, good morning. Good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning.
Siddhartha sir,
Yes, sir.
am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are absolutely audible.
you just kindly request principal madam and take permission and of the resource persons regarding the beginning.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
11:30.
absolutely. Yeah. Madam, it is already
Yes,
11:30.
yes,
Shall we
yes,
start
yes, we
or?
can. Yes,
Okay,
yes, we can start our program. It's already 11:30. Our guest
okay, madam.
also joined.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
madam. Okay, fine. Welcome, dear participants, students, researchers, as well as the faculty members from different colleges and institutions to our one-day national webinar on future of cinema, implications in post-pandemic situation. The Department of Film Studies, THK Jain College, sincerely express its gratitude for your participation in our today's program. As we all probably in a despicably horrified state of mind because of the global outbreak of this dreadful virus, which have been named as novel coronavirus by the biological scientists, we should not be encapsulated into only the issues that are concerning us. Rather, we should academically look into it in a much wiser sense as well as with a wider vision. The virus is affecting lives of the individuals, and that is true in all respects. But the pandemic and the consequent lockdown has impacted in a macro scale across the nation. As far as film is concerned, it is a profound form of art because of its creativity, storytelling nature, direction, acting, music, and all other components of artistry. But at the same time, it is also an industry. People work in this industry. Some may be affluent, but a large portion of the workforce in the film industry is casual workers who have lost their jobs. We, as audience, may consider cinema as a medium of entertainment, but for many, cinema is also a means for earning bread and butter. At this hour of crisis, when we are expressing our concerns on economic implications, we must also show our concern to the future of cinema as it is significantly contributes to the economy. We have two eminent academicians with us today who shall be deliberating their expert opinion upon future of cinema implications in post-pandemic situation. Dr. Anindya Sengupta, Assistant Professor, Department of Film Studies, Jadavpur University, and Professor Sudipta Acharya, Senior Faculty at Whistling Woods International, Mumbai. Welcome both of you, sir. At the very outset, I'd request our Honorable Principal Madam, Dr. Mousumi Singh Sengupta, to address her welcome note and say a few words. Over to you, Madam.
Thank you, Siddhartha, for your nice introduction. It is my pleasure and privilege to offer a hearty welcome to all the participants to the national webinar on future of cinema implications in post-pandemic situation, which is organized by Department of Film Studies of THK Jain College. Now, though it is organized by film studies specifically, but the journalism department, journalism mass communication department has also taken a great part in organizing this seminar. So I am thankful to the organizers. I am thankful to the Siddhartha, Ramprasad, and all Shaumik and all other teachers who are associated with the organizing this webinar. Now, let me offer a special welcome to our today's guest speakers, Dr. Anindya Sengupta, who is an assistant professor, Department of Film Studies, Jadavpur University, and Professor Sudipta Acharya, Senior Faculty, Direction Department, Whistling Woods International, Mumbai. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation to speak for all of us. Really, what Siddhartha has mentioned in his introduction, that really we are undergoing a severe crisis during this pandemic, and lockdown has been already enforced everywhere. So we are how can we forget our academic duties? But so we, the academician, have a major role in so that our teaching learning system will not be interrupted. So with all this, the Department of Film Studies and Journalism Mass Communication, they have come together to organize such an webinar, which is basically, I think, the will enlighten all of us about the implications of this cinema in post-pandemic situation. We are really fortunate to have these two eminent speakers amongst us, and I hope that it will be a great session. So once again, I am thankful the members of the organizing committee, convener Ram Prasad, and all other faculty members who are associated, and thankful to the who are giving to the teachers who are also giving the technical support for organizing this webinar. So once again, I welcome all the participants to today's webinar. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much, madam. Thank you very much for addressing your welcome note. Now, I would request our convener, Professor Ramprasad Gain, to deliberate the concept note of our today's program and say a few words at the very outset. Over to Professor Ramprasad Gain.
Thank you, Siddhartha. Good afternoon, everyone. Respected Principal Madam, respected speakers, respected colleagues, students, participants, and college governing committee, and also webinar seminar technical team. All of you, welcome. Welcome to all of today's national webinar seminar on Future of Cinema Implication in Post-Pandemic Situation, organized by Department of Film Studies, THK Jain College. What will film be like in 20 years future? The ongoing COVID-19 crisis has led to large-scale anxieties about the future of the arts. We are the largest filmmaking nation in the world. The film industry offers job to several thousands. This pandemic situation will significantly impact our film viewing behavior and both economical decision around it. We might stay from the film theater to avoid large gathering. This could also indicate a shift towards viewing film on online platform, which have already made a dent during the lockdown period. Netflix, Amazon Prime, etc. have witnessed a record surge in subscription during the lockdown. This does not mean that everybody has turned a film lover, but that this platform offer a plethora of entertainment option for people locked inside the homes. Also, you could bypass many of the problems of filmmaking or film theory. One of this censor certificate. If you are release film on this platform, the ongoing pandemic, many of film festivals are moving online. However, there is also a grave danger. Access to these platforms is largely limited to an urban demography that can afford an internet connection, along with the subscription fees, which also determines the class character it potential viewer. If this were to become the norm, it would exclude a large majority of the film viewer population. That will be denial of cinema of those who have been is utmost supporters. Thank you. all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ramprasad Jain, for your welcome address and deliberating the concept note as well. So we will straight away move towards our first plenary session, and Dr. Anindya Sengupta, who is our resource person today for the first plenary session, shall be deliberating his valuable insights into the topic that we have chosen for today. Before we straight away jump into our session, I have a special request to all the participants who are attending our program today. Please keep your audio and video muted. Please don't unmute yourself unnecessarily, otherwise the program gets interrupted. And another thing is, please do not present your screen. If you present your screen, then it will be a huge interruption when our resource persons shall deliberate their valuable insights in our today's program. So please bear with us, and your kind cooperation will be highly solicited. So now we shall move towards our first plenary session that will be deliberated by Dr. Anindya Sengupta. Before that, please allow me to introduce Dr. Anindya Sengupta. He is an assistant professor at the Department of Film Studies, Jadavpur University. Dr. Sengupta is teaching at the Department of Film Studies at Jadavpur University since 2004, and he teaches undergraduates as well as the postgraduate students of the course. He has been awarded the Doctor of Philosophy in 2019. His research interests are authorship and Bengali cinema and films of Satyajit Ray and Ritik Ghatak. Apart from these, he also bears expertise on Hollywood and post-war European cinemas. Welcome, Dr. Sengupta. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. And thank you, the THK Jain College, for inviting me in this session, the Department of Film Studies, Journalism and Mass Comm Department. And thank you, ma'am, for introducing us. And also I thank the conveners, also the technical conveners and the entire college, the students and the teachers. I should also welcome you for arranging this topic, because I think this most probably one of the first topics, first seminar or webinar on the post-pandemic situation and cinema, and at least in this country. I haven't heard much about such a seminar in this country, organized, and not also much in the world. And I will be talking about the theoretical aspect. That is what Ramprasad actually kind of requested me to speak on, and Sudipta Acharya will speak on the industrial and practical aspects of cinema in this condition. And here I have a kind of, I think I thought when I was requested to, that what does film theory has to do in this situation? What can film theory do in this time of crisis, and mainly when cinema is largely suspended? Now, is this statement true, that cinema is largely suspended? Because as you yourself have said, that cinema has made a huge surge online. So in a way, cinema is continuing. In a way, cinema is continuing to entertain us, to occupy our time, so on and so forth. Cinema is running through in the online, but also cinema is suspended on the theaters, because the future of gathering in the theater is actually much suspect in this pandemic situation. And also what is in crisis is the production of cinema, because production of cinema needs quite a number of people from disparate origins, from different places, to come together and also come in a contact mode. Think of the makeup people, think of the costume people, so on and so forth. They can't do away with physical contact, and there are machines to be touched. and other things. So it needs a huge infrastructure to keep safety methods, to keep health measures and sanitization, so on and so forth, which needs which needs a huge number of a huge infrastructure. So in a way, a heavily capital on intensive, a logistically kind of aided infrastructure is needed for this kind of situation to continue production, distribution, and exhibition in this kind of situation in the theaters. And I will talk about the implications later. But let me go back to the question: what does film theory has to do in this situation? And then actually we need to we film studies people were to soul search that are we entirely dependent on the so-called quote-unquote normal times. That is, we film theorists, we film critics, so on and so forth, we are actually busy, we have actually nothing to do in this kind of situation, in this kind of crisis situation, situation like war, situation like emergency, situation like the pandemics we are right now into. So are we dependent on normal situations? Are we should we go to hibernation actually? Should we just wait for the normalcy to restore, and then again we start talking? Now, if that is the situation, then we should sadly admit that film studies has a film theory. I'm not talking about film studies. That film theory is a privileged kind of discipline, privileged on luxury, privileged on situations of not emergency, so called normalcy. Now, if this is the situation, then let me go on the other extreme of it. Because in this lockdown period, when actually we found a kind of break from the normal rhythm of time, the rhythm of the time of the yesteryears, which was in 2019, and I for the first time, I kind of looked into, I searched for certain kind of responses in the internet. And when I had time enough, one can say, the time enough to search for my for responses to the times in the internet and search it extensively. And I saw that the philosophy, the discipline of philosophy and critical theory, they are being a kind of hyperactive. People are thinking of the implications of the times. People are thinking of the implications in the future, not necessarily of cinema, but the entire humanity as such. And if film studies has a certain connection to philosophy and critical theory of the time, then film theory, film studies as a discipline and film theory as a mode of thinking, then we should say that the film theory can't actually be dissociated from this hyperactivity, this thinking which is going on in the field of philosophy and critical theory. And therefore, the question comes to us is that what will we think about? What are the main concerns of film theory in this kind of pandemic? And I won't say that I have the answers to my mind. But let me continue in this vein. Let me continue in this situation that film theory should be connected to the times, should be connected to critical theory, should be connected to film practice, so on and so forth. Now, something which comes back to us, comes back to our mind actually, that this dual nature of cinema, and this gains a certain kind of urgency during this time. The cinema is a heavily capital intensive industry, and cinema is also an art form. There are overlapping zones between these two existence of cinema as an industrial kind of practice and also as an artistic practice. There are overlaps, but there are largely there are differences. If you ask me, then I have largely grown indifferent to industrial cinema of recent times. I don't find it particularly exciting. and there's a matter of choices and preferences. So I am not much concerned about industry, about the how the industry will function. But I have one great concern, which thankfully the introducer to this entire webinar actually kind of underlined, that film industry actually involves the livelihood of thousands of people. And though, as he said it, that those are not always celebrities, they are ordinary people. And we don't actually want people to lose their jobs. We don't want to people to be penniless and to suddenly collapse into poverty. And we don't want people that they lose their kind of skills they have acquired throughout their career suddenly going obsolete. We need a thriving and prosperous industry. We need a thriving and prosperous industry so that these people get their jobs back. And as it is happening in all kind of capital centers, sectors, that is in the, and it will happen in the industrial sectors too, there will be huge job cuts. People will lose their jobs. Even when in the post-pandemic situation, people will lose their jobs because the costs of things will be kind of kept low. Even before it happened, when people during this situation of crisis and after this situation of crisis, people suddenly develops a huge hunger for entertainment. A huge hunger for entertainment means in terms of cinema, hugely kind of spectacular production. But this spectacular production would involve lesser people, a higher paycheck for the personnel and the stars, and the lesser paycheck might be for the other people who are involved in the production, and also lesser employment might be. I have read certain a kind of blueprint, a kind of draft proposal made in Hollywood regarding how one can actually carry on production in the situation of pandemic and right after the situation and pandemic. And there is always, because of health reasons, because of reasons of health hazards, there has been continuous reference that filmmaking now should involve lesser people. So there will be huge kind of cuts. People will lose their jobs, and so on and so forth. And there are other implications too, but I think this kind of fear and apprehension is something Sudipta will talk about more pragmatically and more eloquently. But I will touch on a few things, might be. That so the industrial cinema, to me, industrial cinema, there's a concern for industrial cinema because of the jobs of people. And because I have also gained this kind of pragmatic kind of realization that all kind of alternative cinema, of which I prefer alternative cinema. I want to be using the term art cinema, because I think art cinema is now largely incorporated into the entertainment capitalism. But if you think of a kind of alternative cinema, alternative modes of production, distribution, and exhibition, this alternative cinema is also dependent on a healthy industry in as such. If the industry if the industry turns sick, then the alternative cinema also turns sick in a kind of way, and that's a complex relationship. I'm not going deep into it. But I'm concerned more about cinema as an art medium, and because to me cinema becomes important in that kind of situation. So the question arises that how can cinema as an art medium respond to these times? And this is not something we can actually give blueprints to, because we people of theory and critical people, we follow the artists. It's artists who through their practices pave newer roads to the cinema, and we try to understand that. We try to understand the implication of the artist. So one can say that this is one of the moments of the history history of cinema, when theorists, when critics, they are actually waiting for the artist to kind of to respond, cinematic artists, filmmakers, performers, to respond to this kind of situation. And let me carry on for that. That first of all, we are waiting. And also, I think for the first time after many years and decades, also, another concern has come up. That is, once upon a time, you know that there can two kind of film theories. One can say that film theory can be actually divided into two types. One is the theory of producing films, producing images and sounds, which is something which we, or in the Department of Film Studies, we deal with it, and also it's dealt with it by Sudipta and others in Whistling Woods. So there is a kind of theory of making, theory of production, theory of meaning making, and also there is another kind of theory which one can say, in a very kind of plain terms, a theory of reading cinema. So we, as an academic humanities discipline in film studies, we are more concerned with theories of reading cinema, understanding the place of cinema, understanding how cinema makes meaning along with other media, understanding the place of cinema in society, so on and so forth. But there had been overlaps in this kind of, in this two kind of theoretical endeavors. There had been overlaps, but largely from the 1980s. Film studies as a discipline, began in the late 60s, one can say, and early 70s, when there was this huge upsurge of a kind of political avant-garde cinema, of a kind of art cinema as a distinctive mode, not something incorporated into entertainment capital as it is in these days, but a distinct kind of cinema historically in the end of the 60s and beginning of the 70s. So there was this huge intellectual development, one can say, development and thinking of a certain kind of cinema, which actually had a formative influence to the discipline of film studies. Then over the years, that is from 80s and 90s onwards, something stopped in film thinking, one can say, within the discipline of film studies, and also in a certain kind of thinking, when the so-called theorists, they stopped desiring a certain kind of image. Now let me kind of explicate this a bit more. Desiring of certain kind of image means thinking of a certain kind of image, thinking of a certain kind of image regime, which might be the future of cinema. Now this is where theorists, a filmmaker theorist like Sergei Eisenstein, or a theorist, only theorists like Andre Baza and Sylvie Kakwer, and the artists, they joined in together. They're thinking, what is the possibility of the image? What is the possibility of cinematic image? What can cinematic image do in the future? But from the 80s and 90s onwards, this theorist thinking along with the artist about the future of the image, one can say, not as it is in, it kind of had a kind of backseat. There was this need to division, that those who produce image, they are in the domain of production, and those who are thinking of image, they are in the domain of reception. But I think in the pandemic situation, where we are so much in hopeless despair, one can say, again this strand of thinking might start again, that desiring a new kind of image. And this desire of a new kind of image, where you think of the image in a new kind of way, this has much possibilities which I can't in today's lecture go deep into, but let me keep it there as a statement. And there are also certain other kind of considerations which come in. As I'm going through philosophy, as I'm going through the critical theory, as I'm going through thinkers, academicians all over the world, thinking about the situation in 2020, I can vouch that capitalism as a dominant mode of production has never come in such fire in recent decades. So they, because there are actually, there always have been certain a kind of political group, a kind of thinkers group, which is vehemently critical of capitalism. But the spatial situation, the spatial urgency means that people outside that kind of critical section, they have also start understanding that capitalism is something which is detrimental to the civilization as well. It's detrimental because it has been proved in 2020 that a kind of system which was busy in grabbing resources, making profit, making increasing the wealth of the few, are not in a situation. They are not in a situation to rescue the humankind, the human civilization in this situation. Mainly in America, if you look into it, I can't go it into details. It's proved that in America, the heavy privatization of the health industry, the heavy privatization of the medicinal industry has actually led to a situation of devastation where the welfare and healthcare of people, the entire, in mainly in the Western countries, the entire the infrastructure is not actually, is not equipped to kind of is not equipped to take care of this. And not only that, its presence, the presence of capitalism, might also be considered detrimental in this situation, in this devastated healthcare and so on and so forth situation. And therefore the ills of capitalism has again come into deep critical focus, because mainly we can say that the COVID situation is actually a resultant of capitalist exploitation. I'm taking a few minutes to actually explain this, that this situation is mainly happening because we have turned nature into our resources of exploitation. And one can say that we talked about colonialism, we talked about new colonialism as a certain case. Film studies as a discipline was born during the heydays of post-colonial struggles in 1960s and 70s, so on and so forth. But there is another kind of colonialism which has been going through, and very few, except some concerned sectors of thinkers, very few people have been aware of. That is the colonialism of nature by mankind. And this led to a situation where the autonomy of the space of animal kind and is actually lost. Animals are not only extinct, but they have come closer to mankind. And this entire advent of new viruses, it started right from AIDS, one can say, because AIDS was actually the origin of AIDS was a monkey species of a certain kind, and there had been the Ebola crisis, the SARS crisis, the swine flu, and many kind of flus, which are actually, and the latest is corona and COVID-19. And this is happening because of this loss of the autonomy of animal kind, and therefore their diseases are new diseases which we are occurring, and this is only the beginning. And this happened because this autonomy of nature actually, or the animal kind, the spaces of animal, when going away, this is happening because of capitalist kind of exploitation. And now we are paying the price, paying its prices, and we will. This is only the beginning. And because as the experts say, that this is only the beginning of a huge series of viral infections which we don't have any antidote to, because they are coming from nature, one can say. So in this situation, why did I go to this political criticism so much? Because in this situation, during this thorough critical focus on one can say onslaught against capitalism, of public sentiments, of thinking, so on and so forth, cinema and film theory cannot actually be indifferent to, because had been moments in cinema when cinema had been actually re-energized, reinvigorated, because of this political upsurge, because of this political movement. So I think the time has come again after the 1960s and 70s, when this relationship between cinema and capitalism need to be made a thorough critique of, and need to be pondered upon. Because in the 1960s and the end of the 1960s and early 70s, it was a capitalism of a different kind. It was the industrial capitalism. Now we are right into another sort of capitalism. The nature of this capitalism quite different from that earlier moment. And therefore, not only in terms of practice, a political cinema has to come out, but also we need to think of a certain political way of looking into cinema. And we need to think about alternative cinema in a big way, because this slow incorporation of art cinema into the political, into the capitalist, industrial capitalist, entertainment capitalist infrastructure had been happening in over the last 30 years or so, where a defined different political nature of art cinema has been almost lost. So one has to think of it, one has to rethink. And here is the time of rethink certain basic concepts which energized actually thinking about cinema in the earlier times. And one can say that one can't have a neutral position anymore regarding thinking about cinema and its relationship to society, politics, and mankind, or in a new kind of way, because this is the time when you need to be political. Either you are here or there, or you have to choose political factions when you are thinking of cinema. One concern which actually bothers me much, because might be I am a bit kind of old-fashioned guy, might be Sudipta is a bit of old-fashioned guy too in terms of cinema, that so somehow we deeply are mourning the loss of the theater space, the loss of theater space as the preferred space of cinema, not only because of the spectacle of the huge image which we loved, and that's how a person like Sudipta or me, we fell in love with cinema because of the big image as such, but also for a different reason altogether. The one I will talk about the societal nature of film viewing. That is, the theater was a place of film viewing community as such, which is kind of now is contingent, is becoming contingent. But I have a very technical, specific loss which I am kind of mourning with the loss of the theater space. And I had been mourning this kind of loss of the theater space even in the pre-pandemic situation, because in the pre-pandemic situation I actually found going to the theater very irritating, because I understood that the urban spectators, the habit. Sorry, mute the mic. Someone has to mute the mic. There is a disturbance actually.
Jutika Nazir, mute. Jutika Nazir, please mute.
Thank you. Actually, when I understood that the film viewing habits of the spectators have changed, it has deteriorated, because spectators love making sounds and talking in the film in the film hall. That was the time when I was irritated, when I was actually moving away from the theater. And now the theater is under danger. One never knows when the theater will open again, and one never knows whether it will be safe to go to the theater. But I have one specific reason for mourning the theater space. That is, only the theater gave us an insulated acoustic space of cinema, which is so important in cinema. The space of sound, a space which entirely is devoted to an experience of cinematic sound. So it's not only the image which matters, it's also the oral space which matters. And what I am very concerned about is that this oral space cannot be replicated in our smart TVs, cannot be replicated in our computers, cannot be replicated in our mobile phones, so on and so forth. We need a very expensively designed room in our home with 5.1 actually sound acoustic designing to approximate that oral space which we enjoyed in theater, which we and even all theaters are not perfect in that sense. But so there will be a huge kind of mutation which will happen with with this moving into the online spaces, into streaming videos as such. And I, for one moment, I'm not sure if it's cinema at all without that acoustic experience. That most probably it's a video. It's entirely video. That cinema will now mutate into a kind of a streaming video, because they never say streaming cinema. They always say streaming video. So these are the things. This mutation of exhibition space, this mutation of deception is something which we need to think about. Because as I understand that when a film is being designed for the smaller screens, not only the smart TVs, but also mobile and other things, then the entire oral experience becomes very flat because we register less sounds. So mainly the entire designing is now kind of is thought in terms of dialogues and a kind of atmospheric evocative music. So the entire channel becomes the oral density suddenly becomes very flat. So this is one example. And one should remember that this sudden turn towards online streaming was not did not happen only during the pandemic phase. It was something which was slowly moving towards in the pre-pandemic phase too, and a huge capital investment was happening before. So in a way, the what was a kind of tendency within entertainment industry of turning the domestic space into a space of consumption, the turning the domestic space into a kind of market, a kind of domestic space where you shop images and sounds. The pandemic is also is actually has helped capitalism to refine its consumerism in a certain kind of way. So one has to think about this. One has to think about how the theater space was a community space, was a different kind of oral space, was a different kind of space where we related to the image in a certain kind of way, and how can survive in a new kind of a new normal situation. One has to think of cinema in an alternative kind of way. And I also have been thinking that in the months to come, the years to come, when I can't go on speaking about cinema as if 2020 didn't exist. One can't do that. One can talk about one can speak about cinema in a denial of that. And let me tell this, that something like this is happening within the cinephiles. As I am going through their blogs, through their websites, I am seeing that cinephiles, and already there was this tendency within the cinephiles in the past decades or so, that the cinephiles actually are a very kind of nostalgic kind of being, a species. But now cinephiles have entirely moved away from the present, and they have now locked in their homes. They're revisiting old cinemas, or so on and so forth. But I think this is the moment when one can actually escape to the future, to the past, and the glories of cinemas in the past. And one has to think of cinema in terms of radical contemporaneity. Something will happen in cinema which is past and obsolete. And past and obsolete means not 10 years before. Past and obsolete means 2017, 18, and 19. And something within cinema can happen which is radically contemporary. And according to me, this can only happen in cinema as an art form, not cinema as an industrial practice. What I can actually predict that cinema as an industrial practice will continue, because the heavy it's a heavy capital intensive industry, and capitalism will try to, as the adage goes on, that the show must go on, and the show must go on means profit must go on, revenue generation must go on. So the Tenet is released in theaters, and there will be films, blockbuster films, which will be released in theaters, but that does not necessarily mean that it's good for the industry, because industry, after the corporatization of industry, and mainly, there was a chance of a level playing ground, where corporatized investors, they could actually invest into cinema. There would be many producers, many players, but there might be, I apprehend that there might be a situation where suddenly industrial cinema will be cocooned within few big production houses. Just for one reason, that the health and sanitation infrastructure, which is now becoming mandatory and necessary for industrial production, cannot be afforded by all production houses. So there is a chance that the entire might be certainly a kind of monopoly of few houses, few wealthy production houses over an entire industrial cinema, which was not the case just in the last year or so. So these are things which I think Sudipta can actually talk about much in much details. But as kind of as a person who is desiring a new kind of cinema, a new kind of regime of images, and new kind of alternative cinema, I can say that I can now, with the few minutes which is left to me, I can actually think of few features, and these are very kind of draft like things I can actually think out, because right now we are in the midst of the things, and we can't actually think of the entire thing in its entirety, that what a new kind of cinema can be like. To me, these are the points. I think that it's proved by the COVID-19 that the human existence is fragile, that human bodies are fragile. We are fragile beings. We are not almost immortal beings. Perennial the human body is not a perennial kind of almost a very durable thing as such. That we are precarious beings. We are fragile bodies. So I would love to see cinema as such, cinema of fragile bodies and precarious beings. But that does not mean a cinema which is filled up in despair. Cinema is a storytelling medium. I'm thinking of fictional cinema, because non-fictional cinema, I think non-fictional cinema which has a new urgency in this situation needs an entire different lecture altogether. One can't just cursorily think of non-fictional cinema a certain kind of way. Non-fictional cinema, I think, it has a call of the time as such. But I'm limiting myself to fictional cinema, that the value of fictional cinema is that it can tell stories. So the fictional cinema can now be start telling stories of a new mankind of all, a very precarious mankind, where people whose jobs are going, people who can easily feel sick, and death and disease is things we can start talking about it. And we need also to, without falling into despair, without falling into a kind of brutalization of mankind, we can think of dreams and hope and aspirations in a new kind of way. I think cinema is a powerful medium to look at nature. So we can actually, cinema can now look at landscapes and nature in a way capitalism doesn't. Capitalism looks at nature and landscape in a very exploitative way. It's resources, natural resources, and cinema can actually provide a new way of looking at the nature. And cinema, I think, can decenter human being from the center of the nature. Cinema can show human beings as part of the nature, not as a master of nature. not as the center of nature. Cinema can do that. Cinema has done that. Cinema is a medium of thinking, and through its storytelling, through its myth making, cinema can rethink of concepts like freedom, concepts like mortality, concepts like happiness, concepts like hope. And cinema, I think cinema can reconnect these concepts with a new paradigm of space and time. Cinema has looked at space and time in a new kind of way, and cinema can do it again. But what I think is most important, what a new kind of cinema can do now, is thinking of image in a new kind of way. Because cinema, once upon a time, and it's actually the gives us goosebumps to see it. Once upon a time, cinema was a very kind of attractive image, the image which can record time and movement. But now we should understand that cinema is part of a mediatized world where there are lots and lots of image making medium, and cinema is one part among many. So cinema has to regain a certain kind of value of image. Cinema has to regain certain of value of its own, so that it can separate itself through an act of difference from might be a YouTube video, a Facebook video, a video which is a clip from a film. Cinema can think in terms of totality and think in terms of a new kind of image, an image which has a certain kind of value, an image which has a certain kind of philosophical value, so on and so forth. So I think it's not entirely a moment of desperation, because it's a moment when artists and thinkers hand in hand can rethink cinema in a new kind of way and re-energize it in a new kind of way. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sengupta. Thank you very much for your valuable insights. Sir, you have become very much optimistic towards the future of cinema, and you have really critically analyzed cinema as art form, both as art form as an industry. Thank you very much, sir. We shall be proceeding towards our second plenary session, and Professor Sudipta Acharya shall be deliberating the second plenary session. And before that, again, I have a few announcements towards the participants over here. Please hold on your patience and please bear with us. We shall be posting the feedback link after our second technical session, before the question answer session, and kindly fill in the feedback form to get your certificate. And meanwhile, some of you are trying to present your screen and you are trying to unmute your microphone. Please don't do that. That interrupts the program. Okay. We shall move towards our second plenary session. Professor Sudipta Acharya shall be deliberating it. Before that, please allow me to introduce Professor Sudipta Acharya. He is a senior faculty at Whistling Woods International, and he is teaching there since 2018. He has been trained in direction from Film and Television Institute of India, Pune, and graduated from there in the year 2000. Throughout his academic journey, he has worked at several film institutions and trained many students of film studies. A warm welcome, sir, from our part. Sir, over to you.
Thank you, Siddhartha. My thanks to and congratulations to THK Jain College for organizing this webinar and for inviting me as a speaker. My heartfelt thanks also to the principal madam, the conveners, and the students who have gathered. Also, it's a great moment, great personal moment for me, because Professor Anindya Sengupta has been my teacher when I went to Jadavpur to do a very late MA, so it is also a moment of fandom for me to listen to Professor Anindya, and it's always insightful to listen to him, and you will find that there are a lot of convergences when I talk about essentially the industry, but it is very difficult to restrict oneself to the making without looking at the philosophical dimension of the filmmaking process. Nothing exists by itself, you know. To begin with, you must already know, and I think Anindo referred to certain guidelines from Hollywood. Any industry worth its salt is relooking, is readjusting, is recalibrating. I am almost very, very close to the heart of Hollywood. To the heart of Bollywood. I teach in an institute which is very close and to Bollywood, and we have been seeing that Bollywood, the various associations in Bollywood have put together their mind to come out with very, very lengthy dockets about the protocols of in a post-pandemic situation, about how we should go about in organizing our daily shooting routines. Some of them you already know, and I'll just like to sort of underline it. Anindo also mentioned about them in brief. One very key area is the inclusion of medical units, which will check your bodily fitness from time to time. There will be facilities for blood checking, blood checkup, and other things. There will be regular sanitization programs, and also interestingly, and much needed, is the insurance program for every unit member till the last spot boy. So this is something which didn't exist, and pandemic in a very unfortunate way has sort of brought it into the lives of the common audiovisual workers. Human lives are very, very cheap. Especially an Indian life is extremely cheap, and we know about that. I was a student. I have grown up listening to the woes of Bhopal gas tragedy, and the whole case was fought in a U.S. court, and the U.S. court had exclaimed that we didn't know that the Indian lives were so cheap. So that is something we are used to it. So thanks to the pandemic, it might sound perverse, but thanks to the pandemic, that now the last man standing or woman standing in a unit, also has an insurance cover for his or her time in the sets. The other side of it is the expenses. The expenses goes up. I'll talk about that. The other protocols are lesser number of heads. Every star comes with an entourage of around 10 to 12 people. Not all of them are so essential for the filmmaking process. So we know that the industry works on a principle of excess, and there is a huge manipulation of this excess to garner profits. And not just in a very legitimate way, but also in a way that is below the table. So with lesser number of heads around, so the major Bollywood productions will be cutting the excess, the fat, and make it a much more slimmer sort of a process. Again, loss of jobs, invariable, inevitable. The other important things are like dissolving gatherings during breaks, during the lunch breaks and stuff like that. So there will be graded lunch break systems, so that not more than 10 people assemble and not more than 15 people assemble at the same time. One can understand that these measures have been taken in very good faith, to keeping in mind the overall health of the individual audiovisual laborer and the larger society of filmmakers at large. And also, interestingly enough, there has been guidelines about contactless action. So no kissing, no smooching, no sort of intimate scenes, no touch. You know, um, this does not directly result in job losses, but as a filmmaker, I think this is very, very unfortunate. Because other than the sights of seeing and hearing, touch is very important. Touch is a very important human connection, and and I think every time two human beings come in close contact with each other, they touch, they embrace, they hug. It is a huge moment, which has a huge affective quality. We are looking at a situation where scripts are being retutored to arrive at a contactless sort of an action, where we speak from a distance. A distance that invariably brings a coldness into the into the whole narrative. The whole purpose of cinema as a medium that brings people together. Just imagine a film like by Mohsen Makmalbaf on the 100 years of cinema, on celebrating cinema. There was a long montage of people embracing people, or people of all types coming and embracing. That sort of a film, that sort of cinema will be temporarily halted if I don't be cynical. I would assume that we will not forget those cinemas. That's those cinema which brings people in touch with people. It is not just an ordinary contact, but it's a contact that makes you feel my heartbeat, and I feel your heartbeat. We become supremely conscious about our existence, and that we can stand by each other. The warmth, the human warmth that we can directly contact, directly communicate. That I think is also a big loss. In terms of a narrative, in terms of the emotional urgency of cinema, and things like that. Apart from the other losses that Anindya was very rightly talking about, but industry is like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, that it certainly gives employment to a huge mass of people. On the other hand, also, it panders to an excess that directly mobilizes, garners profits, instant profits for its masters, for the people who control the medium, and which in another way, drives out the independent, the solitary filmmaker, who is outside of the industry, or who is on the margins of the industry, drives out such filmmakers. So if one can, I would really like to look forward to a new formulation of the industry where it is much more leaner and thinner, so that every unit, every film that is being made has an investment that justifies the returns, and thereby maybe make it more friendly to the capital, and not only more friendly to the capital, but also creating opportunities for more films to be made, more independent films to be made, and becoming some sort of a level playing ground. As Anindya was saying, that this is something capitalism is not able to come to terms with. So that is very, very important. I would like to wait and see instead of predicting. As of now, the situation is extremely grim for the independent filmmaker. It is not very happy for the industry either, because because of the long times that are being taken for shooting to happen, to shooting to complete, to for a particular length of film to be canned, so which automatically increases the price, and therefore returns on investment goes down. So so it is that the capitalist has really something to worry about. um, so it will be interesting to also watch how over a period of time the industry sort of turns around, sort of manages to cope with these sort of challenges. Besides the fact that theaters have run out of fashion, it is no more necessary for a film to sort of premiere in a theater. One's heart goes out for the thousands of people who work as usherers in not just in a multiplex but in single theaters, and the projectionists and people like that, people who are responsible for the maintenance of a single theater. In one stroke they all lose their livelihood. So it's a very difficult time, no doubt about that, almost comparable to World War One and World War Two. But certainly I think we have to wait. This cannot be the end. This cannot be the final thing. Even during the World War II, we know that cinema was mainly made by the poverty row producers. But a new form of cinema was generated. That was the noir, which continued to capture our imagination much after World War II got over. And when Hollywood went back to its spectacularity and its the usual habits of making the large, big budget productions. Noir continued to survive in new names. And at the same time, one has also got to be hopeful, taking a cue from what happened before and after World War II. For a very long time, the Russian school of montage completely sort of dazzled the vision of film lovers across the country, and we thought that there couldn't be anything beyond the Russian montage. This is the zenith of cinematic language. And with the coming of the World War, and that too in a continent which is based on rationality, we suddenly realized that human intervention has brought them to on the brink of total disaster. So with the coming of the World War, there was also a huge amount of suspicion with this, with human intervention. Human intervention itself was under a big question. So when the World War ended and the material condition in the post-World War generated a situation like Italian neorealism, where we see a more democratic fashioning of the image and the evocation of space. It was as if we are renewing our relationship with cinema. And immediately it was like the end of the Russian montage. And we could see a new horizon for cinema, and great thinkers of cinema like Andre Bazin and the likes of him started writing about this new form of cinema. So I would suggest that as much as the World War II halted, brought to a big pause the big march of image, it also brought a huge amount of churning from within. And with the conclusion of World War, that churning came out in various expressions, not just in cinema, but in theater, in literature, and so on and so forth. these questions today which we are asking, what is the future of cinema in a pandemic situation, is not a question which a painter is asking. What is the future of painting, or not a poet or a writer is asking. I mean, even during the World War, when people ask what was James Joyce doing when whole of Europe was at war, he was quietly spending his time in his country home and writing Ulysses. Why, therefore, we need to ask that cinema cannot follow a similar path. The questions about the industry, the questions about commercial cinema and art cinema is a question that is not unnecessary, but can become very easily an academic question if we rethink about or refashion the need of cinema in this difficult sort of an hour. Believe me, as a teacher of cinema, I have been flooded by small films by students across the country who has been using their the resources that are available to them to make films which are message oriented, and telling what we should do and what we should not do during the pandemic. And being a teacher, one sort of patronizes them at times. But believe me, I have been bored bored stiff looking at these films, which sort of continuously rehashing the same sort of things as to what I should do during the pandemic and what I should not do in the pandemic, that I should stay at home, that I should follow all my passions, which I have not done so far, renew my relationship with my close people, learn to cook, learn to do still photography, clean my house. Believe me, nobody is wiser by making films on these things. Nobody is wiser, and we should not reduce the big brief, of cinema. We should not reduce it to a mere means of communication, where nobody is wiser. So we have to come back to the thought in these times, and Anindya has given broad hints towards what could be a new way of looking at cinema in a post-pandemic situation. I completely agree with Anindya, and I just want to underline a few things by saying that we need to relook at a cinema. Not that cinema didn't exist; we had enough of those examples, but we need to bring them in the center now. It is high time that we need to bring them at the center. Cinema that realizes that the humankind is not the center. Humankind cannot be at the center. The humankind was not at the center was well understood the day somebody said that the earth moves around the sun and not the other way around. The day when we moved away from a theological understanding of creation to a more democratic understanding of organization of our reality. From then on, human being has been uprooted from the center of creation. But we are in a continuous denial. We sort of look at ourselves and we think that we are at the center of creation, and that also is a sort of a capitalist myth. And Anindya has been laboriously trying to explain the capitalistic sort of a game plan, the challenges in front of capitalism. One cannot agree more, but I would like to locate the issues of capitalism because I am a filmmaker, because I deal with individuals, because I try to tell stories of individuals. Is that I would like to look at the smallest unit of capitalism, the individual himself or herself. We are the foot soldiers of capitalism. And in this pandemic situation, I would like to know as much as what Facebook is doing vis-a-vis hate mongering. I would also like to know what the individual is doing, how the individual is recalibrating. Not all is lost. We were having a all faculty meeting at my institute, and the chairman of the institute posed a question to all of us: what were your learnings? What are your learnings in the last 3 months or the 4 months? And going by the answers, in various ways, in various language, through various sort of realizations, every faculty member was sort of posing a question towards oneself. If I could theorize all their responses, I would be saying that the answers were all lying towards anti-consumption. We are everybody recognizes that we are in a consumptive race, that we want to eat, we have to eat more, we have to buy more clothes every month, buy new shoes every month, buy another flat somewhere, an apartment, although we have a place to live under. So this consumption as the basic sort of as something of a which is eating into our soul, is something that is being recognized by a fairly large amount of intelligent people, and it is necessary to go back to a more Gandhian way of approach of simple living and high thinking, and it is necessary to reuse, to pass on what we have to our fellow citizens, and it is not that we have not done it. It is not that we have to learn it. It is that we have to just renew it. I can tell you from my experience as a school student, for somebody who was growing up in the 70s and 80s, we always used to look up to our friends who were just 1 year above us to pass us their biology book at the end of their class, at the end of the year, or to pass us their geography book at the end of the year. It used to be a great fun to get their books, their notes and everything, books which carried all their marks and the notes which they have made on it, the underlines which they have made on it. Believe me, it used to be much more fun than reading a new book from the new store. The elder brother always used to pass off the clothes to the younger brother, and and so many times we have heard the son wearing the shirt or the trouser or a sweater which the old father has stopped using. There is a special type of renewing of relationships. It is not an empty talk anymore. It is like a real renewal of sort of relationships through reuse of what you have already of something which somebody has already gone through. Cinema has huge implications when you talk of reuse, when you talk of anti-consumption. For quite a long time now, there are films that are being made on archival footages. There are films which are being made on cinema which already exist. Anindo can talk a lot on that. Anindo, when there was a phase when Anindo used to continuously make 10 minutes films or 15-minute films based on the footages that he used to download from the films of great masters. I distinctly remember one such film in which after that Syrian boy, a little Syrian refugee boy, a boy's body was found abandoned on the sea beach, and Anindo connected that whole incident extremely evocatively with the last scene of 400 Blows, you know. I mean, I still remember, and believe me, I'm not exaggerating, it is still giving me goosebumps, you know. Only the thing is, we do not, we will never consider it as mainstream practice. We will never look at it as the normative practices in cinema, because there are no stars involved. But it is time. I would really like to believe that a new cinema has to emerge, you know, and mainstream cinema has to take cognizance of that. Apart from the fact that that the human beings are no more at the center, there has to be an inward vector, you know. But before I talk about the inward vector, has any one of you seen 23 Skidos, a Canadian film? Please go and watch on Vimeo. I'm writing the name so that all of you remember. 23 Skidos. It has no human characters. One of the most evocative films, short films though, on how human settlement will be in a post-nitrogen bomb bombarding, you know. So just have a look at that film. I'm not being prescriptive, please believe me, but I'm saying that it is possible to look at cinema beyond the organizing consciousness of the human mind, you know. We have to recognize that plants have consciousness. We have to recognize that a piece of steel has consciousness. If I throw the steel in the outside and let it weather for a year, and it will gather not only moss, but it will gather rust over it. So clearly, human beings are not the only ones who have consciousness. So it is time that we recognize these consciousness which exist outside of cinema. And if talking about human beings themselves, you know, it is necessary to go inward. It is necessary to reverse the vector from spectacularity. Believe me, I don't have anything against spectacularity. It continues to amuse me. It continues to entertain me. But if you're talking of a more value-added image, which Anindya was talking of, you know, we also need to understand what an inward-looking or a vector of cinema, which is looking inwards, which is not directed outward into the world, is all about how it can be structured and told. No, again, it is not that I'm saying this for the first time. You know, people have all done that. You know, there is nothing inside the human mind, or let me put it in a different way. There is no problem in the outer world which cannot be solved through thought that exist inside our inner mind. You know, our bowels have sung endless songs which sort of talks about the mind. You know, I mean, you must have you must have heard of these that very popular bowl song, which I'm forgetting the lines, the verbatim lines. Tor ghore bash kora mon kojona, you know, janish nemon. You know, what is it exactly saying? It is trying to talk about the inner self. We go to Tarkovsky, and he is continuously, in a film like Mirror, in a film like in the film about that astronaut who goes to outer space, is continuously talking about solutions in the inner world. You know, so it is not that filmmakers, thinkers, philosophers have not spoken about going inwards, taking the inward route to understand a problem that exists outside of us. You know. So I for myself, you know, I can tell you as a filmmaker, what have I been doing for the last 4 months, you know, apart from teaching and going online. You know, I have started reading, believe me, I've again started reading Arogya Niketan, by Tarashokar Bandyopadhyay. To understand what death is, to try and understand death more intimately, at a philosophical level, to come to terms with it, because I have lost count of the people that I've been losing every other day, and I've been continuously thinking about a play called Daghor by Rabindranath Tagore, which sort of is preparing us for this great event of death. It is about this boy who is quarantined, actually quarantined inside his humble home, and his conversation with people outside, with a postman. These are very, very important landmarks for me in literature. Literature which is existing absolutely in my own yard. I do not have to go anywhere. I'm a Bengali, and these are an Indian, and these literature, this treasure exists absolutely in our in my house, in my backyard, in my library. So we need to go back to these things. I don't think we have to do anything anything like a rocket science. And of course this will help us to sort of come to terms with the pandemic that we are in, the grimness of the pandemic that we are in. So that sort of brings me to an end of my 2 naya paisa wisdom, about these moments, and my sort of engagement with this particular time. Another very interesting thing, as a film teacher, I have been also continuously collaborating with my students, mentoring them, and something that we had devised in my institute on the lines of personal cinema was self-portraiture, where we had asked every student to create a self-portrait, like a painter makes a self-portrait. We said that use mixed media, use painting, use literature, use narration, use installation, use video, use music, use sounds, whatever you can do, whatever you can find, whatever you can lay your hand on. Use still photographs, turn the camera on you, turn the camera on your feet, turn the camera on your house, on the look out of the window. Do whatever you want to do. Sky is the limit. But come with a 5-minute essay that sort of describes your inner world. We had devised this exercise in the previous semester, that was around January. Believe me, the results have started to come in, and each one of them is so evocative, and I would like to show 1 or 2 of them if there is time, if time permits, or I can share with you the link. You can also see it on your own personal time, and you will realize that how filmmaking can gear up to this sort of a challenge. It is not necessary that we have to continuously look at spectacles. We have to continuously to create a magnum opus for cinema to exist. Job loss, yes, as Anindya pointed out very, very correctly, is a concern. These are also moments where we need to stand by each other, where we need to cut our clothes and make space for others also. We need to work hard to earn, not for oneself but for another fellow citizen also. Our responsibility does not end with us. Our responsibility extends much beyond ourselves and our immediate families, to the larger community, that is that exists all around us. Especially we, the people who are fortunate, to have some sort of an surplus. It is time to share our surplus with everybody else. But to look for to look at cinema for all solutions, I don't think that would be very, very wise. To look at cinema for all the cinema will not have all the solutions. Also, I share the sense of loss of not being able to go to theater along with Anindo. So I'm confined to my own drawing room looking at Netflix. Um, but I also would like to raise a counterpoint to Anindo's overbearingly concern about technology. I was speaking in a recent conference on sound in cinema and sound after the coming of virtual reality. There is something called immersive sound, which all sound technicians are extremely excited about. And they immediately talk about, when they talk about immersive sound, they immediately talk about formats like 5.1, 7.1, Atmos, and things like that. While one cannot deny the gains of these technological innovations, and the fruits of these technological innovations are there for many of us to cherish. I would like to draw the attention to cineasts, to filmmakers, film teachers, filmmakers, to the fact that immersive sound does not begin with technology. Immersive sound begins with a willingness to listen. If through my narrative, I'm able to create a willingness to listen, I will crane my ear to listen to even the minutest sound, no matter where the sound is coming from, no matter what the format is. Even if the format is mono sound, I can give umpteen examples from the black and white era, from cinema of Michelangelo Antonioni or Federico Fellini, or simple Dolby sound in 1975 by Tarkovsky, or even the black and white films of Tarkovsky, and hundreds of other filmmakers, Ritwik Ghatak, back very close to our heart, for whom these immersive technologies didn't exist, and we were absolutely in an undithering sort of a relationship at what was being what was sounded and what was created on the visual level. So to make too much of a point on technology, I think will not be very productive. I think we are looking away from the human agency. We are looking away from the man behind the machine, or the woman behind the machine. So with that, I would end my my speech, and I hope it made some sense to all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your valuable insights. And we are really privileged to hear you. You have really touched different dimensions about film and filmmaking, and as audience, how we should interpret cinema, and especially that part that we shouldn't be dependent upon. We shouldn't look at technology as a whole, but we should look at the man behind the technological aspects. Now we should move towards our next session. That is the question answer session, and for that I would request our joint session coordinator, Professor Anindya Chattopadhyay, to take the charge and please conduct the question answer session. Over to Professor Anindya Chattopadhyay.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are absolutely audible.
Okay, thank you, sir. And thank you to our speakers. Like we have learned a lot of things, lot of new ideas we have gained from today's these two discussion sessions. And now we are going to look forward to our question answer session. The very first question that we are having today is asked by Professor Shomik Chatterjee, our departmental head of Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. And the question is for both our honorable speakers. What is your observation regarding implications of pandemic on independent filmmaking in terms of production and exhibition, as the OTT platforms are soon going to be controlled by the studio conglomerates? This is the questions asked by Professor Shomik Chatterjee to both our speakers, sirs.
Okay. Anindya, would you like to take the question?
I think Sudipta actually is more kind of equipped to answer this. But I'll pass over to Sudipta. First of all,
No, please,
Sudipta,
Anindya, please, please.
Sudipta, thank you for reminding that little film I made, because I almost forgot it. Yeah. Which I often kind of jocularly I kind of describe it as emotional montage. One can say. Okay.
But believe me that you had an impact on your students, on your audience.
Thank you so much. And okay, this is the concern. Actually, the question asked is so important in that sense that I was thinking about it even before the pandemic in the last 3 to 4 years. That as the everything is moving towards television, in my opinion, television is more controlled. Television is more controlled, that the process of making films for television or even web series, one can say. One can't actually say television now. Let's say the streaming medium. It's more controlled, where actually the producers' demand might have more the kind of one can say that generating funds, gathering viewership for a kind of cinema which is always kind of marginal, which is trying new things. Actually, the one of the bad habits of the consumer, that is the viewer, is that the viewer actually, in my opinion, that many might actually dislike this, that it's actually the viewers who are least concerned about newness in cinema. The artists are always trying to show something new, something unthought about before, and the viewers are always so habituated with something which is so conventional, which is actually has nothing almost new in it. And therefore, one has to see that independent cinema, I think the term independent cinema is a bit vague for me. To me, alternative cinema is better. That alternative cinema, how much the streaming platforms and so on and so forth, in this controlled situation, in this situation where funding and etc. is controlled as such, how much funding they can generate. But I think one must be hopeful, because you see that cinema is always a site for struggle. There are certain artists, there are certain people who, from the beginning of the history of the medium, is always trying to struggle and make their space within, had to fight for their spaces within it, and they had been pretty successful in that sense. But cinema is a history of actually struggle. So I think in the future, new cinemas, alternative cinemas, if this is the vehicle of the future, the streaming platforms, one will actually make a place there also. But the terms and conditions of those, how it will be made, is something we don't know, and that actually makes the medium, the medium possibilities of the medium so exciting, because we don't know how it will happen. We can't speculate as such, and it might have huge possibilities, one can say. And over to Sudipta for the next for a continuing answer to this.
completely agree with what Professor Anindya says. Just to take it ahead from there, I would like to say that there's one big myth with the coming of the digital technology, that it has democratized the medium. It has democratized the media. It is one of the biggest myths, because apparently anybody can make a film now. But the entire democracy stops at that point itself, making of the film. When you look at exhibition and distribution, it is an extremely controlled medium. The type of content that is there on OTT, the type of control which was also there in the theaters, in the post-digital exhibition, they were extremely controlled, very centrist in their approach. And even when I'm talking about production, an independent filmmaker actually explores a very small, narrow segment of the entire bandwidth of the digital technology. If you're talking about India, there are big agencies like Red Chili's production who are actually using digital technology to create huge spectacles and to create narratives which were probably not possible in the past. Remember films like Krish and things like that. No independent filmmaker can afford to make a film like that. So it's a huge myth that digitalization has brought about a democratization of the process. No, I don't think so. I think the grip of the has even more has increased even more. And if you look at the OTT platforms, they are extremely the type of content that is coming out is hyper violent, hyper male, and it sort of numbs you. There are hardly any web series which talks in an alternative sort of a voice. So, but as Professor Ananda also correctly says, that the journey of a filmmaker has always been that of a struggle, because we know that cinema was born in the marketplace, and we have to live with the sins of it. As Tarkovsky, a Christian, believes in the sin. So we have to. A filmmaker has to have the energy of the 7 C's, and needs to find the energy and the wherewithal to fight this entire superstructure of capitalism, to arrive at a on the dint of his or her own conviction, to arrive at a cinema which is very, very personal. Yeah.
Thank you. Then we are going to take up our next question, which is also related partly with the previous question being asked. This question has been asked by Lahori Mukherjee, faculty member of Maharaja Monindra Chandra College, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. And this question is also for both the speakers. The question is, this pandemic has created the OTT platform for film release. Will the revenue picture reflect a change for the entertainment industry? This is the question. Over to you, sir.
Okay.
Sudipta, yo. No, yo. This is beyond me, actually.
Yeah. There has to be a lot of slashing of the revenue, because you do not anymore have 5,000 prints releasing across India. If you remember the film which was made on wrestling by Amir Khan, it got access to almost more than 5,000 theaters in China. So all of that is now is now a thing of the past. But within what is there, the OTT platforms, there will be huge profit centers that will be created, for which will try to tip the balance in favor of the stars, which will tip the balance in favor of hugely nationalistic films, and films on sports, and films on bravery, and very, very hyper male films, which backed up by big stars, so they will enjoy the major share of the pie that is coming from the OTT platforms, but as of now, yes, there will be a slashing of the revenue. There is no doubt about that.
Okay, sir. Then we are going to take up our next question. This question is being asked by our professor from Department of English. He has three questions for both our speakers. The first question is, what happens to the Indian B and C grade film industries? These are huge in terms of production and employment, especially in Mumbai. However, these are the spaces where physical intimacy cannot be deprioritized. This is question number one. Question number two, will AR and VR technologies have more roles to play in post-pandemic cinema? And the third question is, can there be a rise in animated GFX dependent films in contrast to theatrical production in post-pandemic time? All these three questions are being asked to both our speakers by Deepayan Dotto, our assistant professor from Department of English, THK Jain College. Over to you, sir.
I think yes, the B and C grade film industries, they might be in jeopardy or turn the precarious, and this is of course a concern, and because since it's a kind of capitalist industry, there will be reorientations, there will be cutting of flows of funds to profitable. And I think this wouldn't be something new. This would be something which have been, I think this is a process which would just accelerate as such. Regarding the AI and VR technologies and the animated films and GFX dependent films, well, this was the case actually. And to me, being me, I am a kind of a fan of animated films. Ghibli Studios or Miyazaki films, I'm hugely fond of this kind of films. But what I understand that all animated VFX films are not actually Ghibli Studios and Miyazaki films. So therefore, there might be a huge turn away from reality. And this is a concern, and this is already happening in the superhero films or in the past couple of decades or so. That industry is moving away from reality as such. So this might actually increase. Sudipta.
I completely agree with Professor Anindya. B and C will be badly hit, and there is no doing away from that, because the nature of films that they produce needs a lot of intimacy. And as far as the VR and AR as well as the animation, I know for sure that is one industry which is doing very good. Nobody has lost their job. They are working almost 18 hours a day trying to deliver, and they have been continuously working from home under extremely stressful situation, and there's a huge demand on trained manpower, and low-skilled workers are also being pulled in, and so the AR and VR industry is doing really, really good, and we will see, more such films, And I remember when, as a student, Professor Moinak used to tell us that a time would come when the human character would be replaced by fudgies, and that was a new concept for all of us, so where you would not need a Shah Rukh Khan, but you would have a fudgy who looks like Shah Rukh Khan, who would do all the dialogues, actions in a very, very believable sort of a way, So yes, B and C will be hit.
Okay, sir. Then the next question is being asked by Bandana Basu, and the thing that I can make out of the question that has been asked by her is that she wants to know about what the students need to do to get a job in the film industry in the post-pandemic situation. What is the potential job aspects for the students in the film industry in the post-pandemic situation? I think she has been asking this question to both of our speakers.
Yeah, can I take that question?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
Yeah. As you already know, that this is one of the most unstructured industry, So there are nothing like campus interviews and things like that. It's a very loosely structured industry. So the only way you can get a job is to do a lot of networking. If you have some sort of a portfolio, you go and meet important directors or directors with whom you would love to work, whom you look up to, whether they're directors or cinematographers or editors or anybody else or writers, So you have to do a lot of network, The only other place probably which has a semblance of organization is the television industry. In Calcutta, you have a host of big television corporations which are making television programs all around the year, and they keep needing manpower at the zeroth level. So you can approach these television houses, but again, they also do not have a very organized way of drafting newly skilled people, So again, in television industry, whether you are, if you want to approach an organization like Z or things like, or any other organization like that, you have to create a network. You have to know the insiders. So that is a bit of a difficult stance, But this is something which each one of us have to live with at the beginning of our career, and then you slowly make your progress inside. There is no other shortcut.
Okay, so we are having our next question from our faculty member from Department of Film Studies of our college, THK Jain College, Kaushik Mukherjee. So Professor Kaushik Mukherjee is asking both of our speakers that we always criticize the idea of censor board run by the state itself. Now we can bypass censor board, putting our films on OTT platform. Is it not making OTT capitalism more powerful? This is the question being asked.
Well, just my bit to pieces then. Then I will forward the question to Sudipta. In our case, look, censorship is always about politics. So censorship is out there to kind of to regulate political ideas. But to our embarrassment might be, because especially in the case of Bengali filmmaking scenario, one can say that if you kind of if you just give if you search something very humble, you can try it. If you search something humble like a Bengali short film in YouTube, then you will see lots of soft porns kind of being available, mainly by a production house called Popul Theatre. So point is that we have this tendency to think that whenever the censorship is lifted, it's always about violence and sex. So that's a problem. Censorship, when there is a lack of censorship, etc., we can think of ideas which are very kind of critical of society, critical of power, so on and so forth. So I am not very sure that the lack of censorship will actually induce more creativity, because yes, capitalism would be actually controlling things, but and in a sense that censorship will actually move into OTT platforms very soon. It has already moved in. I think it will move in. And censorship is not always about a board. It's not always about a governing board. Censorship is all already in the minds of people. People might think that this type of ideas are not good, so they must be censored. It's also about people's commonsensical desires also, what they allow and what they don't allow. I am not very hopeful in the commonsensical attitude of people. I think largely the general middle class attitude towards images and ideas has been very conservative in recent days, very conservative and very narrow minded. So that's another question altogether, the censorship from the board and censorship within us. Sudipta.
The heydays are not going to last for long. If there is no censorship in the OTT platform, these days are numbered. There's already murmurs from within the establishment that can we allow uncensored opinion to come through in the OTT platforms. So this is going to be a very very soon you are going to witness the time that OTT platforms will be censored. Also, the other thing is they have a thing of self-censoring. So OTT platforms are already self-censoring the content based on guidelines that exist for censor board. And that apart, I also share the distrust or the mistrust with contemporary trends regarding how we are using the freedom around a non-censored content. I do not think we are using it in a very matured way. Although I do not want to sort of throttle any voice, let all voices exist. But as a society, we have to be more matured to understand what we need to air, what we need to promote, and what we don't need to promote. A case in point is Facebook. As a technology, historically, it has been the right wing who has used technologically very proactively, compared to the other progressive sections, and we can see the hate speeches on Facebook, how it has been mobilized for fomenting hate and absolutely unconstitutional views on the Facebook. So it is not a very happy moment for us as Indians, as a nation. The other side is that there are a lot of protests, and Facebook is asked to sort of mend its ways. It has been given a backhanded slap, and they are forced to now admit the large lapses that they are going through. It is. I look at, as much as that I do not subscribe to censorship. I'm also doubtful as to how responsibly we are going to use our freedom.
Okay, there are many questions coming up, but due to lack of time, we cannot take all the questions because we are having this short time span. And so this will be the last question of today's webinar. And my apologies to all of the participants. I cannot take rest of the questions because we don't have much time left. And this is our last question of today. This is also being asked by Professor Kaushik Mukherjee of Film Studies Department. Our domestic space are turning into film space when we have started making films sitting in our homes. How does this change of aesthetic mode would affect film theory? Do we need a new theoretical lens? So this is the last question. Over to you, sir.
Well, this is to me, this is not very kind of. I don't see much hope into it because ironically, Bengali cinema in the last 30 years or so, it has also largely moved into indoors, shutting it outside from the external reality as such. And we see too many films about middle class drawing room spaces, middle class bedroom spaces, so on, located within actually within middle class. So when the entire image regime gets located into the filmmakers' space of their own, one has to rethink this notion of domestic spaces or rethink this notion of private spaces in a new kind of way. The way this kind of space of the inside had been practiced in last 30 years is it is fruitless and boring to me. So I think one has to think of it in a new kind of way. Sudipta.
I can completely understand Professor Anindya's vexation with Bengali film scene, but I would like to very make a polite little suggestion, that if we have to look at our interior spaces as the new sites of cinema, there is a way of creating unfamiliarity with the familiar. This is the table in which I spend the most part of my day, and I am acquainted with each one of these articles that exist here: a pen, a book, my mobile, my some casing, and a lot of other documents, But the moment when I frame each one of them, the moment when I put a camera on top of them, I am creating a very unfamiliar relationship with essentially things that are very familiar, and therefore making them special. The word in Bangla would be bishesh, making them extremely special, although it is being generated from very hackneyed sort of spaces, overused and shown again and again, to the extent that one might think that they have lost all vitality, But it is the type of attention, it is the type of time that we are giving to these spaces, So through these formal devices, it is possible to reinvent our inside spaces and relook at them. Of course, I again repeat, the Bengali film industry experience is not very positive, does not raise a hope, but there are a lot of other options available. To remind, I'm reminded of a very austere film by Bellatar called Turin Horse, which is all located inside a room. But apart from such great masters, I was also telling you about this whole experiment which we were doing with our students in a particular module of self-portraiture, where a filmmaker is asked to create an essay about oneself by looking at things in his or her familiar world. And believe me, it is possible to create a very to look for the unfamiliarity in the familiar, and thereby re-energize the image in a beautiful way.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, both the resource persons, for being with us today and deliberating your valuable expertise opinion upon the different implications of cinema, especially the future of cinema and the post-pandemic situation as well. We are really privileged and honored with your presence. So thank you once again, both of you, sir. That brings our session, since we all are running out of time and we have to come to the concluding point of this program for today. That actually brings us to the very ending point. Now, I would again request our joint session coordinator, Professor Anindya Chattopadhyay, to deliberate the vote of thanks and officially announce the closure of our today's one-day national webinar. Over to Professor Anindya Chattopadhyay once again.
Thank you, sir. We have learned a lot of things in today's webinar. Not only about the future of film industry in post-pandemic situation, but a lot of other things also, like the technical aspects, the theories and their interrelation. And we have also learned that we should stay positive in this tough time, and we should look inside ourselves to find solutions, and we should not be always searching outside to find the solution of all the problems. So we had wonderful sessions, and now as we have reached the last stage of our today's webinar, myself, Anindya Chattopadhyay, Assistant Professor, Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, would like to deliver the vote of thanks. First of all, I would like to thank our respected Principal Madam, Honorable Dr. Moushumi Singh Sengupta, for her continuous motivation, help and support. The idea of organizing today's webinar was also that of hers. Thank you, Madam, for being there always for us and always inspiring us and motivating us. I would like to thank Sri S.S. Jain Sabha, all our respected governing body members, especially our respected Secretary Sir, Sri Lalit Kankaria. I would like to thank our respected speakers of today's webinar, Dr. Anindya Sengupta and Professor Sudipta Acharya. Thank you so much for sharing such valuable ideas and information with us and being a part of today's webinar. Thank you so much. I would like to thank the organizing team of today's webinar. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Ramprasad Jain, Head of Department of Film Studies and convener of today's webinar. Thank you, Ramprasad sir, for being such a great team leader and coordinating the whole webinar in such a good manner. Thank you, Professor Siddhartha Chatterjee, for moderating today's session. Thank you to Professor Shomik Chatterjee, Head of Department of Journalism and Mass Communication. And thank you, Professor Ankita Bhattacharya, Professor Jyoti Shaw, Professor Raj Dotto, Professor Kaushik Mukherjee, and Professor Dipayan Dotto for all the help and support to organize today's webinar successfully. And thanks to our staff member Shavni Pal also. Thank you all of you, because without your help and support, today's webinar could not have been arranged in such a proper manner. Last but not the least, thanks to all the participants for actively participating in today's webinar and making it a successful one. Thanks to all of you, and with this note, I would like to end today's webinar, and hopefully we are going to meet soon yet again in such an interesting and innovative platform. Once again, thank you all. Stay safe, stay positive, and take care of yourself. Goodbye.
RD sir, okay.
Hello.
Yes, RD sir. Okay.
Yes,
now
yes, RT sir.
we can now formally end.
সিদ্ধার্থ রিসোর্স পার্সন ছিলেন অনিন্দদা, সুদীপ্তদা। থ্যাংক ইউ ম্যাডাম, ক্ষমা করে দেবেন। হচ্ছে
Thank you.
Participant
Thank you. All resource persons have left now.
ওকে,
Okay.
যাচ্ছি।
Thank you
ম্যাডাম,
all.
থ্যাংক ইউ ম্যাডাম।
Thank you, Anindya. Your excellent.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam.
থ্যাংক ইউ আওয়ার রিসোর্স পার্সন আমাদের সবাই এখন আমার মনে হচ্ছে যে সবাই হয়ে গেছেন অফিসিয়াল কনক্লুশন হয়ে গেছেন সো নাও ইটস